because maybe 10 years ago, you did follow some sort of extreme diet and it did get you results. So you think in your mind that the best solution for you right now is for you to just go back to that. But guess what you're forgetting about? 10 years ago, maybe you didn't have kids. 10 years ago, maybe your kids were younger. 10 years ago, maybe you had a different job. 10 years ago, maybe you lived a little bit closer to your gym. I can insert so many things that have changed about your life over the last 10 years where we don't even need to criticize the actual diet itself. We need to criticize the fact that it doesn't fit into your lifestyle, into your schedule as it stands today.
Let's link up with Krysta on the FYX. She's a wellness coach with a focus on mental well-being and physical strength.
What's up, FYX listeners? Welcome to our latest episode of the FYX podcast. I'm your host, Krysta Huber, and I've got a quick little solo episode for you guys once again this week, talking about our upcoming masterclass that we will be hosting on October 22nd. So if you're listening to this episode the day that it drops, we are just a few days away. You've got like 4 more days to sign up for it. Spots are still open. At the time of this recording, I've already had over 25 people sign up, and I'm really excited to welcome all of you inside of the Fitness FYX community, what it feels like, what it's like to be inside of our group and really understand how we think about fat loss differently. And in this episode, I am going to give you a little taste of just a couple. I can't give away everything before the masterclass, but just a couple of the concepts that we will be going over inside of this training. Chaos to consistency, which, as you might guess from the name, is really helping you understand that you don't need another diet. You don't need another training program. And you might be like, Krysta, why would you say that if you are a nutrition coach and a fitness coach? And that's because 9 out of the 10 people that I work with, they know conceptually what to eat. Like anybody listening to this podcast, I don't need to sit here and give you a rundown of the fact that chicken is a great option if you're trying to consume protein. Of course, I give examples to our clients and to people who listen to the show and to people who follow me on social media. But the point really is you're smart. And I want to talk to you like you already have all of the answers, because you do. We just need to figure out what's blocking you from actually executing on those answers. And you know what? I could take that, I could walk that back a little bit, and I could say, maybe you don't think that you have all the answers, because yes, there is a ton of opportunity to educate you in what I think to be the most important area around how your food fits together. And that's what teaching someone about macronutrients is so powerful. The reason why I like macronutrients, why I'm such a big supporter, like doing all the positive PR for food tracking, is because it gives you an understanding of how to have more flexibility in your diet when you recognize on paper. And again, this is where it's like, hey, you're smart. You already have all the answers. You recognize on paper that you can't eat pizza for like 3 meals multiple times a week and have this expectation that it'll feel really easy for you to lose weight. But what if you could? Not saying that that's the best route to go, because we want to think about your energy levels, your digestion, and this is where the macro piece comes in. What other foods you would have to prioritize to continue to lose weight if that pizza was your priority. And you'd have to be really thoughtful about those other food choices, because the way that we lose body fat is by being in a calorie deficit. And in order to maintain that calorie deficit, if we have a lot of calories going towards pizza, which is mostly, to talk in macro terms, carbs and fat, then the rest of our day needs to pretty much just look like only protein. That then turns into you eating lots of chicken, egg whites, and maybe honestly things that on their face like sound a little bit boring, and you can't necessarily dress up with other flavors, sauces, sides, because you are budgeting so many calories and specifically carbs and fat towards that pizza. Point is, I can teach you that. I know that for myself. And yet I've still gone through periods where I have not been able to maintain the progress that I've achieved. So here's what I want you to take away from listening to the rest of this podcast. Not only do you not need another diet, you don't need another training program. Do I think there's a preferred one? Yes. And that was the point of the last 2 minutes of what I just described. But what you need to recognize is that anybody can lose weight. Anybody can, because you can give up the example that I just gave. You could give up pizza for some period of time, and that could be a way for you to lose weight. And you could go in this direction of like, well, I'm going to eat all vegetables. I'm not going to have any carbohydrates that are coming from bread, rice, potatoes. I don't know why you'd exclude those things, but you're like, I'm going to eat only chicken and broccoli and all like the stereotypical foods that people think must be incorporated into their diet and be the only focus of their diet in order to get the results that they want. Anyone can do that. And here's how you can do it. You could turn down social events. You could be fully committed to cooking all of your meals at home. You could avoid work dinners. You could avoid going to parties. You could avoid going on vacations. You could be really, really structured. There are people out there who do that, but that's not most people, right? And it's definitely not most people for more than an extended, like a very extended period of time. It could be anybody for 12 to 16 weeks. It probably could be anybody for a full year if they're at a point of being so frustrated by a lack of progress that, by the way, it's not coming from them committing to the chicken and rice. The lack of progress is coming from why you are unable to continue following something like that formula of just chicken. And why are you unable to continue that? Because of all the examples that I just mentioned that most people would assume the only way to make that easy is to avoid doing those things. Avoid the dinners out, avoid the holidays, avoid the celebrations, avoid the work trips, avoid the vacations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We don't live in a world like that. And if there's one thing that I know, having had this feedback from clients consistently, and something that I really pride being associated with inside of the FYX brand, is the fact that I want you to recognize that I am a real person just like you. I want you to see me going out and enjoying myself so that I can show you too how that is possible for you. But I also want you to recognize there will be seasons where we might need to pull back on some of those choices. I didn't say eliminate, but we may need to pull back. And so that leads me to this whole notion of the fact that, like, yes, anybody can actually lose weight. So it's almost like you don't need help with that part. And you do. And the reason why you do is because I want to show you the way to lose weight that's going to help you with the part you really need help with. Most people need help with maintaining their results. Even clients who absolutely crush it for the first 6 months of us working together can go through phases where something else changes in your day-to-day routine, something changes with your job, something changes with personal responsibilities, something changes with a relationship, something changes with a family member getting sick, something changes and you have to move. All of these variables that are guaranteed to happen because that is life are going to come up. And you have the method in your back pocket. You have multiple methods in your back pocket that you could use to lose weight. But what happens when some of those other variables start to shift? Just surviving becomes more important to you because you go into this mode of like, I have to be able to figure this out. I have to focus all my attention on this other thing. And what does that turn into? A domino effect where you become very reactive with your food choices. You stop meal prepping because you convince yourself that you don't have time. You, if you are a food tracker already, maybe wake up every morning with the best intention of tracking your day. And all of a sudden it's 7 o'clock and you've tracked like breakfast, some of your lunch, but you kind of just like threw it in there and then you ate something else. And then you tracked one snack and you have no desire to track your dinner. And on top of that, you're not going to eat the dinner that you kind of made up for yourself in your head because you've had a long day, you've been really exhausted, and you just want to be able to, quote unquote, not think about it. And that then turns into a daily routine for you. Or maybe it's not even daily. Maybe that becomes your thought process 3 to 4 days a week, which is already half the week. And now all of a sudden, if we take a step back and benchmark that behavior against the behavior and the decisions you were making when you were focusing on losing the weight, we have a very clear-cut example as to why. We have clear evidence as to why you have not been able to actually maintain it. And this is where every other diet starts to break down. Because if we go back to the extreme example that I was just describing a few minutes ago, those are the types of approaches that when you feel emotional, when you feel stressed out, you don't want to follow. So, what is the best course of action that you can take? I'm confident that is the approach that we have developed inside of the Fitness Fix, because we're talking about everything that surrounds the rest of your routine. I've referenced this on the last several podcast episodes that I've done, most of my solo episodes over the last few months, talking about time management. If you didn't catch my episode that I did last month about this idea of, oh, I'm the person who says I know what I need to do and I'm just not doing it, please listen to that episode. I will link it down in the show notes for this one. Even if you listen to it already, it has a lot of similar themes that we will be touching on inside of the masterclass. But ultimately, the approach that I want to support you in attending this masterclass and understanding what we do inside of the Fitness Fix is helping you better look at your roadblocks, helping you better look at what happens on a Monday morning or a Sunday night when you're getting ready for the week. And maybe you do have the best intentions at that time. What kind of goes on for you in a very tangible way? Let's look at your calendar. Let's look at your day. Let's review your schedule and talk through, hey, I see this schedule and this is how I normally handle it. And if how you're normally handling it coincides with you feeling uncomfortable when you get dressed in the morning, with you feeling frustrated when you step on the scale, then something needs to change. And most of the time, what people feel they need to change is this 180 of your food choices. When the reality is we need to change your approach. We need to change your strategy. And just last week, I mentioned an awesome quote that I picked up from a networking event I went to in New York City on the last podcast. So if you caught this, you'll have heard me say that I would do a whole podcast episode just on this concept. So here it is. Modifying your strategy to fit your reality. So in your mind, you have past evidence that's fair that you have this evidence. Why do you have this past evidence? Because maybe 10 years ago, you did follow some sort of extreme diet and it did get you results. So you think in your mind that the best solution for you right now is for you to just go back to that. But guess what you're forgetting about? 10 years ago, maybe you didn't have kids. 10 years ago, maybe your kids were younger. 10 years ago, maybe you had a different job. 10 years ago, maybe you lived a little bit closer to your gym. I can insert so many things that have changed about your life over the last 10 years where we don't even need to criticize the actual diet itself. We need to criticize the fact that it doesn't fit into your lifestyle, into your schedule as it stands today. So modifying your strategy to fit your reality is also why I'm such a fan of macro tracking, because it's just a tool. And inside of that, there are other tools that we can play around with. So what does this look like when I'm having a one-on-one conversation, messaging back and forth with one of our clients inside of our program, or giving them feedback on a weekly basis when we do their check-ins, or hopping on a Zoom call with them? That might look like, and this just happened to me the other day at the time of recording this. I had a client who mentioned to me that work was especially busy and we had recently had a few hurricanes. She was affected by having lost power. It changed her plans one weekend. You lose power for even a day, then you wind up throwing out food, right? Like it can just throw a wrench into things. In her world of being busy with work, that leads to more work events, which leads to more meals being eaten out. And when we sat down and had a conversation about what was going on, there was one change that she made in comparison to when she was feeling really good and feeling like she wasn't quite as busy, feeling like she had more of a handle on things. And that was this. She noticed that she stopped eating her go-to breakfast that she loves so much and really looks forward to because she had gotten so much busier at work. Why did that happen? She would come home at the end of the day, was really tired, just honestly would have rather slept in for another 25, 30 minutes instead of getting up a little earlier to go ahead and make her breakfast. But then what happened? If she skipped that breakfast or she had a much smaller one, she was particularly hungry at lunch. Some days that lunch turned into her skipping it or not eating something until 3 p.m. Now, all of a sudden, she's starving. None of us make the best decisions on our meal choices when we're starving because our hunger becomes an emergency. And now, as I'm describing this to you, you're probably sitting there nodding your head or on your walk or listening in your car, nodding your head and be like, yeah, I can totally relate to that because that's happened to me before. Same girl, more times than not, when I was not prioritizing taking advantage of my tools of tracking my food and also meal prep. That's what my day kind of felt like. So I can really empathize with this. And I know there's a lot of you listening to this who can empathize with this because you're like, yeah, that's all too real for me. So we start talking about the fact that she was skipping that breakfast. And what was a cool moment for me to recognize how much self-awareness she's built because we've worked together for over 15 months was she told me, I noticed that I'm not making the best decisions and I'm not feeling as good and as confident about myself because I'm not having that breakfast. Why is that important? Because it's a very specific and again, very tangible change that she can now go make. And that was my directive to her. If you do one thing over the course of the next week to get yourself out of this funk that you're feeling, make it a priority to eat your breakfast. How is that her modifying her strategy to fit her reality? Here's how. 3 months ago, we were in a phase where she was diligently tracking her food and pre-planning her meals at least 6 out of 7 days out of the week. We were really conscious about making sure on Sundays she had a game plan for what she was buying at the grocery store. She had those go-to meals ready to go. Where now, over the last couple of months, we increased her calories a little bit, gave her a little more flexibility. Why? Because we knew this season was coming. We anticipated the fact that things were going to start to get busy. We even had a conversation about this on our last Zoom call and recognizing, hey, are we seeing this like yearly cyclical pattern here that now sends us a really solid alert to be like, we do not diet and we do not put ourselves in a calorie deficit between the months of like July through October and probably not through the holidays either, because this is a busy season. And then the holidays, it's just, there are more events. There are more meals that are going to be higher calories. So why do that to yourself? But now she's developing a blueprint that she can take with her well beyond our time spent working together. She now has this calendar in her head that she can rely on and say, hey, I kind of know this about my schedule. So unless my job were to change, I am not going to set myself up for failure. I am going to set myself up for success by intentionally choosing not only to not be in a calorie deficit during this window of time, but to also think about ways that I can better show up for myself by making things easier. Now, notice I didn't say entirely give yourself grace. I said modify your plan, modify that strategy. So when we know that we're busier, this is the time where we're saying to ourselves, hey, I got a lot more going on. I'm feeling the stress a little bit. There is a version of me that would love to just DoorDash something or pick food up on the way home, maybe even skip my workout. And if you didn't get the best night's sleep, I'm not advocating for you to avoid that recovery and rest, but here's where we show growth for ourselves. And here's where we recognize that something like food tracking and something like macro tracking and actually understanding how to meal prep is so helpful. In this busy time, in this chaotic time, what we can do instead to maintain our consistency and maintain our results that we've worked so hard to achieve is we adjust the expectation because one, we don't need to be quite as dialed in as when we were focusing on tracking everything really diligently so we can maintain that calorie deficit. But that also doesn't mean we need to go in the other direction and throw everything out the window. So what do? We buy more rotisserie chicken. We buy deli turkey meat. We buy canned tuna. We make our meals very simple. And maybe we only track our protein for the entire day. If we've reached a point where we're confident enough that in us just tracking our protein, we can still have that self-awareness to be thoughtful about some of the other food choices and ingredients that we're cooking with, or maybe we're really good at eyeballing. So we throw everything together as we're heading out the door in the morning, but we do take the 5 minutes at the very end of the day to go ahead and track it, to just sort of spot check and make sure that we didn't eat way more than we were being honest with ourselves about, or just didn't necessarily realize because we weren't spending that time and using your MyFitnessPal, Chronometer, whatever food tracking app you're using to actually show yourself how those foods fit together. And just, again, kind of spot check, like, did this work for me today? Or like, was I a little bit over in this one area that I didn't necessarily realize because maybe I was being reactive and I was multitasking, or I was just trying to grab the next best thing. So yes, we're giving ourselves a little grace, but we're not giving ourselves grace to the point where we're like, I am going to completely ditch the habits and behaviors that I established to get me to this point where I have lost the weight. It's more about tweaking the approach inside of the overarching approach. So the overarching approach here is I'm making this commitment to myself to develop the self-awareness through tracking my food. I'm learning about macronutrients. I'm learning the right balance of macronutrients for my body. I'm learning the importance of getting enough sleep, steps, hydration, managing my movement, getting to the gym, resistance training, etc. But I know that I don't have to be checking every single one of those boxes at any given time for an entire year, week after week, in order for me to see progress. What I can commit to for myself is having these 12 to 16 week periods, maybe 1 to 2 times a year, where I am fully committed to those things, but doing it at a time that actually makes a whole lot more sense. So it's really not about someone handing you a meal plan and saying to you, hey, if you eat these exact foods, I can guarantee that you will lose weight. I could. Of course you will. That should be the guarantee of that meal plan. But I'm going to take it so far as to say, who cares? Because that's not the moment that matters. That's not actually what you're looking for, unless you can sit here and tell me that you would be willing to eat those foods all the time, every single day, forever and ever, and you'd somehow be able to make that work when you're at a restaurant, or when you're traveling, or when something goes up and there's a wrench that gets thrown into your plans. That is not life. That is not most people. So ultimately, it's all of the pieces that have nothing to do with food that have everything to do with your food choices, that have everything to do with the way you think about food, with the way you think about training, and ultimately with the way you think about taking care of yourself. And that's where the Fitness Fix comes in. We help you bring all the other stuff into perspective. We help you adjust. Why? Because I know you already have these plans to do it all. I know you already have these plans as a high achieving person to be able to do the most, and you're not willing to bend on that. But there's an area where you're really misaligned. You want to do the most, you want to do it all. But because you choose to do that at the expense of yourself, because you choose to do that at the expense of taking care of yourself, because you compromise by being reactive with your food choices, by skipping those couple of workouts, by staying up late on your computer a little bit longer just to get those last few emails out, you're actually not doing it all because you're not doing you. You're not taking care of you. Let's change that. Easiest way you can do it, most immediate action you can take, is by signing up for our upcoming masterclass. It's on October 22nd at 7 p.m. EST. The link is in the show notes. You can also DM me on my Instagram account at the Krysta Huber. Just DM me the word masterclass. I will shoot you over that link. And if you can't make it live, if you just heard that and you're like, oh, I have this conflict at this time, sign up anyway. It will guarantee that you get the replay to your inbox. And if anything I said in the last 15 minutes was a bit of a light bulb moment for you, I promise I'm only going to expand on this with more examples, more scenarios that may apply very directly to you to help you adjust, and then give you other tools and ways to think about how you can execute on this, which of course, the best way to execute on it with 100% support would be to ultimately join our one-on-one coaching program too. But let's at the very least start with this masterclass. Come check it out, see what we're all about, so that you can go from a place of, hey, I'm constantly trying to lose weight, to I'm past the phase of losing it. Let's talk about maintaining it, because I'm ready for where the real work starts. And I don't want to keep starting over. And I don't want that for you either. So come hang out with us. It's going to be fun. And with that, from wherever you're listening from, I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. And I will catch you guys next week.